here from Northwest Illinois Audubon, and I'll give it up to you, Don. Take it over.
Thank you, Gary. And I guess before I introduce Greer, we're going to ask you if you have a question along the way to put it in the chat. And if you haven't done that before, at the bottom of your screen, there's a little mark that says chat. All I have to do is type it in there. And at the end of the program, Greer will go through those. Don't worry about if it's something he might cover later. We can just skip that question later on after the program. If you have something that needs pertinent answers right away, Gary and I are going to be watching, and we'll break in with our voice to ask Greer that question. So I can't tell you how excited I am about tonight's program. I've known Greer and his family, his whole family, for a long time, and they're all amazing people. And sometimes, we miss out in life at certain ages or for so many different reasons. And if we're lucky enough, sometimes we find that person that we can vicariously live through. And that's it with Greer's adventures and me. He's a through walker of the 2,100 miles, the Appalachian Trail, which goes from Georgia to Maine. And finding that wasn't enough, later on, he decides to walk the 2,600 miles of the Pacific Coast Trail that starts in Mexico and ends in Canada. He still enjoys backpacking. His most recent trip was 175 miles. And if you're doing some adding of miles, there's a whole bunch of miles that he's been walking on the Ozark Highlands Trail in Arkansas. One thing I am not living vicariously through Greer is that in 2 months, he expects to receive his JD from Marquette University. But it never hurts to know a great attorney who likes to hike. So here to take us on the hike of a lifetime is Mr. Greer Black.
Thank you for the introduction, Don. And thank you to the Northwest Illinois Audubon Society for having me. I hope everyone's spring migration is off to a great start. Personally, mine's a little lackluster, but I guess I haven't quite had as much time as last year with everything shut down. That was a great time to really get into the activity. So like Don said, my name is Greer, and I'm here to talk about my 2016 Pacific Crest Trail hike. I am actually going to go ahead and turn my camera off because I keep catching myself looking over at my notes, and I don't think it's a good look personally. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Just give me 1 second. All right.
Let me interrupt for just a sec. If everyone
Sure.
can turn off their own videos too, just to make sure we have enough bandwidth, that would be excellent. Thank you.
So yeah, like Don said, my name is Greer Black. I'm here to talk about my 2016 Pacific Crest Trail hike. For those of you who don't know, the Pacific Crest Trail is a 2,600, actually I think it's like 2,650 thereabouts, give or take, mile-long footpath from the border of Mexico and California through Southern California, then through the high Sierras and kind of central Eastern California, through Northern California, Oregon, Washington, and up to the Canadian border. But before I get into that, I kind of want to talk briefly about how I got into this whole world of long distance hiking. So I guess my first backpacking trip would have been back in July of 1991. That's at Newport State Park in northeastern Wisconsin. I carried my own diapers, and I did a little bit more of that growing up. When I was 14, I went on a 70-mile trip with the Boy Scouts down in New Mexico. Then in college, a friend of mine and I decided to hike the Appalachian Trail in 2013, and we did just that. For those of you who don't know, I think Don mentioned the Appalachian Trail goes from Georgia to Maine. It's about 21, I think it's actually closer to 2,200 miles. I think it's like 2195, something like that. And when he reached out to me and asked me, hey, would you like to tell the story of one of your hikes to the Northwest Illinois Audubon Society? I said, absolutely. It was just a bit of a dilemma. Which trail do I talk about? I finally decided to go with the PCT just because the terrain is a little bit more varied. There's a little bit more variety in the landscapes you get. But I do want to do just the Appalachian Trail in 5 slides, if you don't mind. So there's a map of the Appalachian Trail on the right side of your screen. There's me at the southern terminus. It goes from Georgia to North Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And when you start out, it looks kind of like this. There's trees everywhere and nothing's really alive. But then there's still trees everywhere. Things just come alive, and it's kind of the long green tunnel. You are in this long green tunnel for months at a time. I mean, you do come out every 3 to 5 days to stop into town and get some food, but for the most part, you just have what's kind of right immediately around you to look at. Then once you get like the last 20% of the trail, it opens up a little bit in this kind of eastern New Hampshire White Mountains kind of view. Once you get back into Maine, though, you're back in the trees. The only difference is this time around, they're all yellow, or at least at the pace I was going, they were all yellow. And then you go and climb that mountain, and after 6 months of walking, you're done. So there's my my Appalachian Trail presentation in 5 slides. But about 3 days into the Appalachian Trail, I knew that I was going to want to do this kind of activity again. And the next logical step, no pun intended, is to do the Pacific Crest Trail, which is much different landscape-wise. Here's the map of where it goes roughly: California, Oregon, Washington, and it's not broken up into 14 states. It's only 3 states. So instead, people tend to think of it as the desert section, the High Sierra section, Northern California, Oregon, and Washington. Here's me at the southern terminus. As you can tell, relatively clean looking to where I will be in a few months, but it's going to take me a little bit to get there. One of the questions people tend to want to ask about is gear, the gear I take, and this is kind of a good slide for it. So I'll just get started. First thing, I'm actually wearing sandals here, and people are often surprised that I wore sandals. This is a little trick I learned on the Appalachian Trail. The idea is that you have less weight on your foot, and so you're going to expend less energy with each step. I don't know if it's true or not, but I tried out the sandals and really fell in love with them. You've got less places where the footwear is rubbing against your foot, so you have less chance for blisters. This red shirt you see underneath my jacket is going to last all of about 5 days before it's torn to shreds. This green jacket I carried with me on the Appalachian Trail. It's a puffy jacket. They're very fashionable in kind of spring and fall here, just for normal hiking. You don't have to do anything long distance for something like that. And yeah, I guess the same could be said about sandals and blue shorts too. And so this is at the Mexican border. This actually, in the last 5 years since I've hiked this, you can see the wall here, but they've actually changed this wall altogether. It's a different wall. I can't even remember what it looks like now. So here I am a few months later. I've become what is known as hiker trash, and that is kind of the culture of the hiker. You get a little feral, I guess would be the word. So the first section is called the desert, but you're going to notice, from these pictures, from the Terminus picture, that there is a lot of plant life. And the question is it really a desert? And the answer is no. It's actually a different biome that I'm not a scientist. I really don't know, but it's a different biome from a desert called chaparral that is, has a lot of similarities with the desert. It's very dry, but I think there's just more plant life. There's more moisture as well. There are a few parts of the trail where you cross into the desert and cross by it. That actually is a true desert. That's the Anzo Borrego right there, but the trail does dip into it, but only for a very short point at an area in Southern California in San Diego County called Scissors Crossing. I remember when we were walking across this section, there was 3 hikers. There was me, another hiker, and then maybe a quarter mile in front of us was a third hiker. And the third hiker, we caught up to him and he asked the question, "Did you see any rattlesnakes back there?" And no, we didn't, but it put the thought in our mind that, everywhere we were walking, there were rattlesnakes very close to our feet at all times. So this is the 100-mile point. Throughout the trail, part of the trail community tradition is when people get to these kind of benchmarks of the trail, they make a little sign with rocks and you get to stop and take your picture with it. Another piece of gear I have is this rain poncho. And I didn't need a lot of rain gear in Southern California, as I'm sure some of you will remember from the early 70s, the pop song, It Never Rains in Southern California. I can report back to you that that is almost true. Unfortunately, it's a very different story in the Pacific Northwest, where the trail also goes. Now, the thing about this poncho is that it was also my tent. That is my my poncho that is stretched out into a tent. There's a pole underneath it that holds it up, and stakes and guy lines that stretch it out. It was the perfect tent so long as you never needed to use it. The good news is, for most of the trail, I didn't need to use it. Once I got up halfway through Oregon, though, that changed and it became a little bit of a challenge. Another thing, you're going to notice that I'm actually kind of in, there's flower pots here. I'm not really in the woods. I'm on someone's property. That's another important aspect about the trail community. This is true for a lot of major trails throughout the United States and probably elsewhere in the world. I couldn't tell you, but the idea of trail angels, and those are people who live near the trail corridor, who let hikers come in for either showers or snacks or do some laundry. Laundry, showers, and ice cream are kind of the big ones. Beer and pizza and fresh vegetables are another big deal. You got to be careful though. You can get caught in these what's colloquially called a hiker vortex, where you might have gone into town, stayed at a trail angel's place or stayed at a hiker friendly area, and next thing you know, like 3 days have gone by and you haven't hiked any miles. But we'll talk more about that later. This is another, not desert picture that is in the so-called desert. It's just a small Holstein herd that we walk through, and I kind of bring these up at the beginning just to show that we don't really hike through desert. I think it's just called desert because it sounds cooler than calling it Southern California. Makes us look a little tougher. This is called Eagle Rock because there's a picture that looks, or excuse me, because it's a rock that is shaped like an eagle. Oh, here I am still wearing the red shirt. We're going to get to, it doesn't last much longer. This is another area that's in the so-called desert, very close to a stream. It happens to be at a place where there's water flowing, I believe, year round. And so again, doesn't look anything like a desert, not a desert. However, we still insist on calling it the desert. I'm just going to click through the next couple of slides because they're really just show you some of the landscape. There's not necessarily a story or anything to tell you about them. This picture I really do like because this highlights one of the major differences between the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail. The Appalachian Trail, there's not a lot of switchbacks on the trail at all. It just tends to go straight up the mountain and then straight down. Of course, the mountains are a lot smaller. They're the Appalachians and not the various mountain ranges or mountains out west. I'm going to zoom in on one part of the trail and find my little tool here. So you can look at the hill on the left side of the screen. You see that little line that just cuts across the side of the mountain. That is the Pacific Crest Trail, and that is the gentle grade that it follows for most of the trail. It never gets too steep. You can walk 3 miles an hour on pretty much any stretch of trail, whereas on the Appalachian Trail, you can really only do about 2 miles an hour. And you can put down miles a lot faster. I think the biggest day I did on the on the Appalachian Trail was about 26 miles. And the biggest day I did on the Pacific Crest Trail was 54. We did a double marathon day. It didn't end well, but it was, we felt cool for doing it. I'll tell them that story once I get to that part of the trail. Cactus made me feel like I was in the desert. However, unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, turns out prickly pear cactuses grow in like 48 states. So it's actually, again, not that big of a deal. But they were blooming for us, which was a cool experience because I'd never seen anything like that. Now, one thing that can be said that this, the chaparral does have in common with an actual desert, a true desert, is that it's very dry. The way you get water on the trail varies from section to section. In the southern portion and parts of the northern portion, Northern California portion, it's so dry that, getting water from a water source and carrying enough water to get you to the next water source, next true water source, whether, a river or a spring or something, is just weight prohibitive. At one point I was carrying 35 pounds of just water, and that was to get me to a water cache like the one on the screen here. And this is another part of like the Trail Angel trail community where, someone, brings all of this water up there for hikers to drink. And if you look in the top left-hand corner of the little box they have here, you can see a series of a kind of mess of free ring binders. And what those are, oh, there's another one on the top right too. Those are trail logs, trail journals for, hikers to sign their name and, hey, I was here. They might write a little anecdote about their day or something, funny or witty or just gratuitously vulgar. And it's kind of just part of the trail life, is you get to go and you get to see who your friends are, he was here before me. And you get to write your name, and the people who come after you will say, oh, so-and-so is here, just a day or two ahead of us. Because a big part of the trail community is that it becomes a very long, skinny, small town where you start to see familiar faces. As time goes on, you start to recognize people, you kind of build these relationships. I have friends from my hike in both 2013, the Appalachian Trail, and 2016 that I still talk to on a regular basis today. So it's definitely a big important part of the trail life. Now, this is just a road, and you're probably wondering, why the road? And that's because another thing about these dry climates is forest fires. Fires are huge, and they don't discriminate in whether or not they're going to burn an area that has trail running through it, and they take a long time to bounce back after the trail. There's lots of fall downs. Rangers have to get in and clear the area of any dangerous branches that could fall, et cetera, et cetera. And I think the area can be pretty fragile for in other ways as well. So what this is actually a fire alternate. I at the very beginning of the trail was very dedicated to the idea, and I still think this is the right way to do it, but to make sure you connect your footsteps from the beginning to the end. Unfortunately, there's a 30-mile section up in Washington that I chose to skip it. We'll get to that later. It was just a safety thing. This fire alternate, you get a series of directions, usually from someone braver than, myself, who went before me and tried to map out the directions to get back on the trail on the other side of the fire closure. And it usually involves a fair amount of road walking, which is really tough on your feet, in my opinion. And a lot of exposed areas, other dangers such as cars, and you just don't have the GPS elements. The apps that are out there now for these long distance hikes are excellent. Guthooks is the kind of the primo product out there, where you can put your phone on airplane mode where it's not using hardly any battery, and it just shows you on a topographic map where you are in relation to the trail. I use a different device, and this is in addition to old school topo maps. I did carry old school topographic maps for the trail, and as a case in the event that my phone died and I needed to figure out where I was. But the trail is so well populated, so well marked, and as well as the technology I had, I never ended up needing to use it, but it was nice to have those. People do get lost. Every couple of years, there's someone who went missing, who their body has either not been recovered or was recovered several years later. Both on both hikes of mine, both my big hikes, someone perished because of getting lost. But I don't think it's fair. Geraldine Largay is the big example. She was a very experienced hiker who went missing in Maine in the summer of 2013 while I was on the trail. And of course, once her body was found, I think 3 years later, all of the news outlets that reported on it, emphasized that she didn't have a map or compass on her. And I don't really like that criticism, just because on the Appalachian Trail, particularly, a map and compass is kind of archaic technology. It isn't going to do you a whole lot of good. I would say less than 1% of the people out there are going to use that. But anyway, yeah, you're probably wondering what's on the screen now, and this is just a side-by-side of the navigation technology I use. It's a screenshot from my phone, and it says PCT mile 290. And it says there's if you walk north, N, if you look just above that, N 0.5, there's a reliable spring. And then it tells you if there's a campsite, the next one up. And those are really nice. It's just really nice to have that kind of ease. It's nice to turn your phone off too, though, because after a long day of hiking, it's easy to just pull that phone out and look, all right, what mile am I at? What mile am I at? What mile am I at? And you'll drive yourself crazy if you do that. Now, the column on the right side of the screen is the fire alternate. And that's where it says, follow the dirt road under the Route 62 bridge, and it gives you the latitude and the longitude. Alternate mile 8.6, dirt road, fork, take the fork at the right, another 1/10 of a mile, come to the junction, the dirt road. And so you feel a little bit more vulnerable when you're doing those alternates. But hey, I will say this, on one of the alternates that I'll talk about here in a little bit, I did see my one and only barn owl. So that was a very cool experience in Marengo, California. Oh, also, when you're off trail, I came across this on a fire alternate. Things get spooky when it's starting to get dark and you're by yourself and you're off trail, so to speak. You're on a fire alternate, so you're not going to run into as many other hikers, and then you just see a skeleton. It's a little bit unsettling, but it's just fine. This alternate brought me into, I believe, Idlewild, California, which is a very cute trail town. Not a whole lot to say about it other than if you're in the area, I highly recommend you stop by, especially if you're there during hiker season. You'll see a lot of hiker trash hanging around and cooling their heels for a day or two. There I am cooling my heels on some, I guess that's not quite asphalt, but the reason why this picture's in here is I just want to see those lines. Those aren't tan lines, it's actually just dirt. For whatever reason, I tend to be a little dirtier than some of my other hikers, and I have a good friend of mine loves to bring that to my attention. But there'll be other pictures that are just to kind of show how filthy I'm going to get along the way. This is just outside of Idlewild, California. This is Mount San Jacinto. It was the first place I saw snow on the trail, and it was very exciting because after doing the Appalachian Trail, where we saw very little snow and only at the very beginning, I was kind of hoping that the PCT would bring me some new challenges as far as traversing land, and snow was certainly one of them. Not a lot of snow. We'll see more snow later. Here, just these little parts on the north faces of this hillside, the mountainside. I believe San Jacinto, there was a fall this year where a kid in his 20s died. Very unfortunate incident, but it's just, I went through it with, presumably a lot less snow, but I never once, looking back at and saying, someone had a fatal fall where I was is just kind of a little bit humbling. Here I am on the top of San Jacinto. It's one of the, I don't know if it's the largest peak in Southern California, but it's one of them at 10.8. You can kind of see my friends, some friends of mine, they're cut off. The person, closer to the camera, she actually is a very, very cool hiker. She went on to be the first woman to ever hike the Trans-Caucasus Trail, and has recently gotten like raw material, like a bunch of like sponsorships from like textile companies to make her own gear, because she's, you know, going on social media and with her sewing machine and making all these cool products. She just had like this very cool new anyway, next time you're looking for someone to have as a speaker who to talk about hiking, I highly recommend her. I can definitely put you in touch with her if you'd like. Here's the shirt. So this is probably 2.5 weeks into the trail, and that shirt just didn't last. I was very excited when I bought it, because it's very easy to walk into an REI and just hand over wads of cash for every single piece of gear. And so I thought I was clever by going to the thrift shop and just getting this $3 shirt. Unfortunately, it did not last. So I'm going to get and the hat didn't last either. You can see that. But so you'll see my clothes change hereafter. So this is the walk. This is the very bottom of the walk down from San Jacinto. If you look, let's see here. There's my little zoom in tool. Right here's a trail marker. The trail goes right underneath this bridge. And that is probably one of the hottest parts of the trail ever. Or yeah, it's one of the hottest parts of the trail. You can see the windmills over here. What happens is about, right about sunset, the winds pick up and just go from the inland part of California out to the desert, and it gets warm fast. This is actually right underneath the Interstate 10. So this is a Trail Angels house. Hikers come here, they just hang out for the day. And there was a fire alternate, and probably 90% of the people took a bus around this particular stretch. I wanted to, prove I was a, great hiker. So I waited till it cooled off in the evening time after dark, and I hiked around it. It took me about 3 days. I met up with a few other people, actually 2 of the hikers on the couch. I ended up meeting up with both of them. And the first night I get to camp at this place called the Whitewater Preserve Picnic Area. Now, as a picnic area, experienced hiker like myself should have known that meant there was going to be a lot of critters around. One thing about hiking in an area where there's no trees is that you can't hang your food anywhere. I know the convention is to hang your food, but when there's no trees, you have no choice but to sleep with it. So I walked to the Whitewater Preserve, got in about 1 o'clock, and about 3 o'clock, I woke up to 2 raccoons hissing at me. One of my food bags was missing. And I ended up spending the rest of the night in this toilet, or in this bathroom, excuse me. But there's a few kind of moments of hiking where you kind of, it's like a rite of passage. And sleeping in a toilet in a bathroom is definitely a long distance hiker's rite of passage, whether you do it for, weather reasons or in my case, to avoid the raccoons. It is certainly a defining moment. The next morning, I was able to find most of my food, not quite everything. It was really unfortunate. I don't want to contribute to the habituation of animals. But another hiker talked to a ranger about the aggressive raccoons in the area, and they do have to call them there because they are, or they don't have to, they choose to call them there because they are so aggressive. And it was also my first great water source. That is Mount San Jacinto in the background. These are the San Gregorio Mountains. To give you an idea of just the scale of things, if you look down the bottom right, there's a hiker in a little pink. Now, this is a little bit of Southern California culture shock, where they had the no segways beyond this point. I thought that was kind of interesting, but looking back, I think as these mobility devices help people get outdoors more and more, I think that I I think that maybe I was just behind the time. So I'm definitely pro mobility devices outdoors. This is just part of the alternate. You don't see these kind of things on the trail. It was just kind of interesting to see these old mobile homes that don't rust. There's a fair amount of them out there, just abandoned. Desert sunsets, or I guess you can't see me, but I'm doing desert with finger quotes around it. Here's another Southern California culture shock. For filming inquiries, call this number. That blew my mind. That's right in an area, if you're familiar with Southern California, that's pretty much across the street from a famous venue called Pappy and Harriet's. There we are walking the road, trying to get around the fire alternate. Joshua Tree is on a Jeep road. And then we made it back to the trail, and we made it back to the trail spot I was very much looking forward to, because it has a trail sign that says McDonald's, 0.4 miles off trail. Walked under a culvert, through a culvert. Back up up the mountain on the other side of the interstate there, or the highway rather, I guess it wasn't the interstate. Now this is where we got to our first burnout area, where we're actually walking through a area that was a forest fire came through, and people were, it's been reopened and they allow hikers to come through. This is from the station fire of 2009. This is actually in Los Angeles County. It was the biggest fire at the time that they'd seen in LA County, 160,000 acres. This is Poodle Dog Bush. If you're not familiar, Poodle Dog Bush, it's endemic to Southern California. It's one of the first plants to pop up after a forest fire. And it is like, has a poison ivy like characteristics. So except for that, you can breathe it in. And if it gets in your lungs, you can very easily do that. And you end up in the hospital with, poison ivy like reaction in your lungs. You don't want to do that, but it's all over the place. And this is a burned out house that we ended up finding. And one of my favorite campsites, just because it looks very dystopian. We had a fire in the fire pit. It was all covered in graffiti. It had a swimming pool. Here's the memorial from the station fire. There's actually 2 forest fire rangers who died. You can read about it. It's a very humbling experience to walk through the memorial and then see the station that had been burned out. That's Poodle Dog Bush all along the side of the building. And unfortunately, the picture does not show it, but the windowsill was covered with melted glass. I had never seen anything like that in my life. So California, though, is this was actually a different kind of Southern California culture shock. I did not expect it to have so many, I guess, cowboys, so to speak, where people are riding their horses to the store, but they were all over the place. This feels a little bit more like a desert than the Chaparral. Now this is Donna Softly's house. She is no longer hosting hikers, but she was one of the greatest trail angels of all time. She has stopped hosting hikers because of the trail. The trail has become so incredibly popular over the last few years. My year, 2016, was the first year where they had a permit system. And, since then, it's just, more and more people, the permits are getting maxed out every year. People are getting permits for one date and starting on a different date. And they have all these kind of, humans are doing all the things that humans do in greater numbers. So, how do you protect this, kind of fragile environment, the trail, et cetera? And so she stopped hosting hikers because it kind of creates a bottleneck. And one little thing I'm going to tell, it is so then 24 miles away from this is another place called Casa de Luna. Oops, that's more Donna's place. This is another trail angel's place, and there's a tradition on the Appalachian Trail called the Suitcase Challenge. And what you do is you take a rolly backpack, you fill it with 24 beers, and you hike 24 beers and you hike 24 miles, drink 24 beers, and do it in 24 hours. I'm an adult now, and I was an adult when I hiked this trail. The difference is nowadays I try to act like it. So me and a friend did that challenge between the two Trail Angels places, and it was a terrible idea, but we made it. This is the backyard of Costa de Luna. They had just in the Manzanita Forest, they let everyone camp there. This is Southern California. First spring I came across is right near the spot. I get down to the spring where the water's coming out the side of the rock. I'm filling up my water with, it's 40-degree water on a hot day, and a hummingbird came down, sat right next to me, and the area, I guess its forehead, the area just behind its beak, between its eyes, was covered in pollen. I, as an experience I'd never had, and unfortunately I didn't know enough about hummingbirds to know which kind it was. So I do apologize to the Northwest Audubon Society for not knowing. This is the LA Aqueduct. LA Aqueduct is no longer part of the Pacific Crest Trail, but it is part of the water that is brought down, the snowmelt that's brought down from the Sierra to the Los Angeles River. It's a big pipe. Unfortunately, it's such a hot area that you hike it at night. But Erin Childers, who grew up in Byron, she's maybe 8 years older than I am, or 6 years older than I am. Her and her family live out in this area. So, they reached out to me and said, hey, when you're in, doing the LA Aqueduct, give us a call. So I went over to their place and had a breakfast and took a little nap. It was very nice. Laundry, that kind of thing. You can see my beard's kind of coming in. And I guess last I heard, her sons still say, hey, remember that time that smelly guy came and hung out with us? Saw a lizard, saw plenty of lizards, but I actually got a picture of one. Desert sunset. Walking through sand, this picture you can kind of tell how deep the sand is. Walking through sand is difficult because it just slows you down. Yuccas in bloom. Now these are like these hiker families. The first month of the trail is kind of like, you're living in the dorms while you're an undergraduate in college, and everyone's around, they're ready to make friends, et cetera, et cetera. This particular group, everyone was British. They didn't come out together. They all came out separately from Great Britain, found each other, and decided, okay, well, I guess we're all going to hike together. I find my family, but I will introduce them later. This is another fire picture. If you look on the top of the mountain, you can see, you can see the red. That is the fire retardant that is dropped on the forest fire to, I guess, help fight it. Real quickly, this is those mountains way in the back, those clouds, I guess. Those are actually my first views of the High Sierra. So the desert is done. There's me 700 miles into the trail, a little bit of a beard, new shirt, and I am ready for to be out of the so-called desert. You stop at a place called Kennedy Meadows. It is probably the most anticipated part of the trail because you spend 700 miles walking and just thinking of being in a more beautiful area of California, and Kennedy Meadows is kind of the entrance to there. And it's this hamlet where they have maybe 30 people live in the area. They got a general store and places for hikers to set up tents. I spent 3 days here. Excellent time, just playing cards, eating ice cream and having beers. And after a few days of that, decided it was time to move on and headed up to the Sierras. Yeah, people are complaining about $3 gas. You can see there, it's about $5. So now you just walk uphill for 2 days to get to the High Sierras, and then you get to a point where you don't come below 9,000 feet for several weeks. I can't remember the exact amount of time, but it's much different than the so-called desert. And I'm gonna just click through a bunch of pictures because not a whole lot to say. Crabtree Meadows, just below the highest peak in the lower 48, Mount Whitney. Now, marmots everywhere. The next day, which happened to be June 21st, the solstice, which in the hiking community is also known as Naked Hiking Day. And of course, we had to partake. I was lucky. I was able to find enough pictures where I have my clothes on, everyone's clothed, so we do not need to worry about that. Guitar Lake. And there we are on the summit of Mount Whitney. Some of my friends, that's me with the I guess I'm taking a picture with my phone, so someone else must have taken this picture, but that's the highest point in the lower 48. I guess that's all there is to tell about it. Pretty easy climb, honestly. It's just switchbacks the whole way up. And so on this day, we walked up to the top of the mountain wearing no clothes. However, the next day, we're wearing all of our clothes because we are at the highest point that's technically on trail. The Mount Whitney is a little side trail. You do that for a day. If you look up here, it is Forester Pass, which is like 13,000 feet and change, and just quite cold. Also, hikers are weird. I don't know why someone has packed out a toy sword, but he decided that he was going to carry that. It's also the border between Kings Canyon and Sequoia National Parks. There I am. I've finally stopped doing this silly little habit. I always thought I would be clever by putting my headlamp around my neck instead of putting it in my backpack. And I mean, it's helpful, but at the end of the day, like, man, it's kind of a nerdy thing to do. So this is one of the best trail towns you come across in the entire trip. It's called Bishop, California. It's a rock climbing hub. It's a fly fishing hub. It's a golfing hub. This hostel called the Hostel California was like an old brothel back in like the late 1800s, early 1900s, and like a kind of flop house kind of place. And I guess supposedly, legend has that John Muir stayed there when he was exploring the Sierras. Here's just a few pics of there's the inside. I mean, some of the best rock climbers in the world stay at this place. That's one of my best friends from the trail. His name is Gigi. Everyone gets trail names, and Gigi's has one of the best stories. It's Gigi, short for Golden Girl. His real name's Alex, but he got Golden Girl because it was his first time camping on the Pacific Crest Trail. Different than myself, but his first time in a tent was actually on the Pacific Crest Trail, and he decides he's going to bring his his iPad with some videos on it, and he only gets around to downloading the Golden Girls, the sitcom from the late 80s, early 90s, and so everyone heard the theme song every night. But it was kind of a fun little story. We had a huge water gun fight that day. Swig, this is the guy I just went hiking with him in Arkansas last January. For whatever reason, he decided to rollerblade, and he's about to go under a ladder. I don't know, it's bad luck, but he didn't hurt himself. Back in the mountains. So this is actually Rays Lakes. If anyone's looking for a 3 or 4 day trip in the High Sierra, you can get to this location. It's just called the Rays Lake Loop. If you put that into Google. There's me swimming. I'm very terrified of fish, so that was kind of a big deal for me. Bishop Pass. This brings you back into Bishop. It's one of the most beautiful waterfalls I've seen in my entire life. For scale, there's my friend Gigi way down there. And that's just a portion of it. The whole thing is like thousands of feet. Lots of fords on this trail. This is the Kings River. It's one of the more dangerous ones. Most of them are barely ankle deep, but this one could be pretty gnarly. This picture. So you can't see it, but below that snow bridge is like this massive torrent of water. And it's like a 20-foot drop into this massive torrent. If that snow bridge would have collapsed, my friend would have surely died. And I am yelling at him, do not cross the snow bridge. It's not thick enough and you will die. But the torrent was so loud that he couldn't hear me. So I stopped and just took pictures instead. And unfortunately, they're terrible pictures because they don't capture the torrent. So I guess don't go hiking with me, because not only will I not save your life, but I won't even make you look cool when I take pictures of you dying. But he didn't die. This is going up Muir Pass, which is probably one of the snowiest parts of the trail, and it's absolutely it's otherworldly. Another buddy of mine happened to run into him on the other side of Muir Pass, and you can see the water literally coming out of the side of that rock. Much different than the water drinking experience in the desert. Hands down, best sunset of the trail. It's I think it's Silver String Pass or Silverton Pass. I terrible with the names of the locations, but hands down, best sunset. And we made it to Mammoth. This is probably a week after we were in Bishop. This is these are all, probably 60% of the people in this picture are all people I keep in touch with today. This was a fun one. So what we did here was we had about a week's hike from this town, Mammoth, California, to the next town, Sierra City. What we did was we all drew each other's names out of a hat. And then we went to a thrift shop, and for $10, you'd address that person, and that person had to wear those clothes for, till they got to the next town. So that's where the kimono comes from. Outfits. Banner Peak, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Banner Peak. It's in the Thousand Island Lake, John Muir Wilderness area. This is the high country Yosemite National Park. This is the only, wow, all of a sudden the name's escaping me, but it's I think it's the Lynn Creek Trail. But one of the most beautiful points in the Yosemite and on the trail was this creek, and this is the only picture I have of it, which is such a disappointment. But if anyone's looking for a cool hike to do in Yosemite, this is one I highly recommend. It's in the Yosemite High Country, not the valley. From there, we went, of course, to Yosemite Valley, which is not on the trail. We took a bus down, spent 2 days there, and it was cool. We saw the parking lots, and we just people watched for a couple days. I mean, it's ineffable. I can't put it into words. It was just nice to be with your friends and people watch. And the notorious, very blurry picture of the world famous Camp 4. El Capitan, if you've seen the Alex Honnold movie, there it is. And we spent, this is another terrible picture. I apologize for the border, but for whatever reason, we spent that night just looking at the rocks, watching the climbers go up, and kind of like how you look at clouds and decide what shape they were. We looked at the different, coloration of the rock and what kind of pictures we could see. After one climber finally turns his headlamp off for the night, because it takes multiple days for most climbers to climb this, and we gave a big cheer after he turned his lamp on, and he flashed his lamp back on for us one more time. That was a really cool experience. Half Dome, of course. And we're back on trail. I've just got a couple pictures of us hanging out at swimming holes and swimming, but we did this every chance we got. I mean, in the High Sierra, it's almost every single day. This is the section called, from Whitney to Tahoe, which is probably one of the tougher sections of the trail. Hey, made it to mile marker 1,000. A lot of up and down, and it's probably the only time I ever thought about getting off trail, because one particular night happened to be much more mosquito-y than the others. Those are the things that these pictures don't necessarily show, is just how some of the challenges of it, the up and the down, and how bad your feet hurt, and particularly the bugs. They don't show the bugs. For the most part, the bugs were not that bad on the Pacific Crest Trail, just because it's so open, you get a nice breeze. But one particular night around mile 1,000, I just couldn't take it. Shut myself in my tent. Maybe I took a Benadryl or something. I carried Benadryl just because of bee stings and that kind of stuff, but I just put me to sleep, wake me up in the morning when it's done. It was awful. Luckily, that was the only night that happened. If it was going to be like that for weeks at a time, I probably would not have finished. Now you can see the landscape starting to change here. We're kind of getting out of the Sierras, heading toward an area called Sonora Pass near Bridgeport, California. If anyone military background, I think they have a base near there. And if anyone lost a femur, let me know. I can tell you where it is. I really love this section of trail. It's the Iceberg Wilderness, just north of Sonora Pass in Bridgeport, California, just because of the browns and the greens. I thought it was incredibly beautiful. This is our little cuddle puddle. Like I said earlier, my tent was the greatest tent so long as I never needed to use it. And I really hardly ever needed to use it for most of the trail. we would just all lay down on the ground like that next to each other every night, look up at the stars and watch shooting stars and go to sleep. It was really magical. We actually had a beautiful snowball fight. This is like early July, and we had an incredible snowball fight for like 2 hours that day. I have no pictures of it, but it was too awesome of an experience to take pictures. Here we are getting out of Tahoe. This is kind of the crew. This is the trail family that sort of became, we all hike together for the rest of the trail. There's in the Michigan hat, Swig, who's from, of course, Michigan, lives in Arkansas now. I've been backpacking with him. Gigi, who spent his first night in a tent on the trail. He's now since hiked the Appalachian Trail and the Colorado Trail, so he's hiked more than I have. Duck Man in the orange shorts, he hiked the Appalachian Trail in 2009. Of course, hiked with us here. Lib from Australia now lives in southern Mexico, and I think like pays $200 in rent a month for a cottage near, on the beach, and just surfs her life away. I mean, she has a job, but very, very cool people. I was very lucky to spend my time on trail with them. This is a Desolation Wilderness just outside of Tahoe City, or South Lake Tahoe. And this is actually a trail from Google Maps. This is Sierra City. This is the Google car that comes through and takes pictures of everything. And I love this because the country store is just covered in hiker trash. One thing hikers love is hanging out on benches and sitting around not doing anything for a little while. Sierra Buttes and Duckman. Like I said, hikers love to sit on benches and not do anything for a while. This is Belden, California, which is an old gold mining town, which is then bought up by a private property owner. Of course, the trail is on some kind of right-of-way or easement that goes through it. They use it for festivals, and hikers got in free. So we happened to walk in through an EDM festival, an electronic dance music festival. So we went around, we went from like being surrounded by rocks and boulders and nature and all this stuff to being like surrounded by high 22-year-olds dancing to new age disco. But it was a wild time. It was actually quite a good experience. Just ping pong and while you can see down the river all of the rafts and the shenanigans people were getting into. Then we came out a few days later and ended up at Lassen Volcanic National Park. And this is kind of where you leave the Sierra Nevadas and start to kind of get into the Cascades. In the background, there would be Lassen Peak, and in the foreground is a volcanic lake. Lassen Peak again. You kind of see the volcanic rock along the ground. This is, I believe, the beginning of Hat Creek Rim, which is one of the longest, hottest, waterless stretches of the trail. That's doing some laundry, hiker trash style. You just take your clothes, throw them in the sink, and then put them out somewhere to dry. If you're lucky enough to find a washer, that's great, but it can be a little bit of a challenge because you can find other clothes to wear while you're washing clothes. But in Bernie, California, this is the solution we found. Bernie Falls, what this picture doesn't show is like the 3,000 tourists who are on either side of me. Mount Shasta, I love this mountain so much. In 2019, my trail family and I got back together in Bishop, California, and we kind of road tripped around, and we climbed Mount Lassen, and we climbed Mount Shasta. And Shasta was an incredible experience, but it's a story for a different day. A rattlesnake, just so you guys know, I saw one. I don't know who this is, but he had a great campsite. This is my first big day. I did a 40-mile day that day. Now this is coming into a city, and I come in at night after doing 40 miles, and it kind of has this deliverance vibe, ramshackle shacks everywhere, et cetera, et cetera. And I look and I see a couple of eyes reflecting in my headlamp, and I am a little bit concerned because I'm not only in bear country, but I'm also in mountain lion country. So I kind of hold my hiking pole across my chest, and I call it like the defensive position. Because if I was in a situation where I was encountered a mountain lion, I would totally fight it. I mean, what else am I going to do? but hopefully it's never going to come to that. I don't think it ever will, but I'm ready. And it comes towards me. I'm kind of walking towards it. And of course, as it turns out, it was two adorable little house kittens. So I walk the rest of the way into this town, and I look over and there's a truck, and I look at the truck. This town has like a population of like 300 maybe. It's very small. And I have my headlamp on. So when I look over at the truck, I flash my headlamp into it. And of course, the person in the truck was not happy about that. And someone yells at me, and I explain that I'm just a hiker, and the person, she apologizes quite profusely. And I ask her, hey, do you have a beer in that car with you? And she goes, oh, just the one I'm drinking, but you can have it. I just took one sip. And I said, fine, I would love that. And it was a Busch Light, and I could like taste, the perfume on it, but it's one of the best beers I've ever had in my entire life. That was a small world story. This part of the end of the California, I started running into all these small world stories. This is the first one. I had been separated from my friends, and I had walked 40 miles the day before, and I was not feeling that great. This guy kind of comes up to me, starts kind of chatting with me. I didn't want to chat with him. He was hiking south. I was hiking north. Usually you don't, those, it's like the Jets and the Sharks. Those two groups don't really mix and mingle. But he asked me where I'm from, et cetera. And I said, I grew up kind of, near Chicago. He's like, oh, where? And I was like, well, actually near Rockford. He's like, oh, no kidding. And, he's asking me I went to school in Chicago. I know a bunch of people from Rockford, and I'm thinking, well, we're not going to know the same people. But sure enough, he knew like everyone I went to high school with. So it was, kind of blew my mind. Then I made it to the Oregon-California border. That was a big day because California is like 1,600 miles long of hiking, and it felt really good to get out of there. But of course, at this time, I am separated from my friends. That night, I camped with two other hikers that I knew from the trail, but they weren't my trail fam. And one of them calls me over, and he says, hey, come look at this. And of course, it's a scorpion. And I was, oh my gosh, that's kind of messed up. And oh, by the way, this white stuff, this Tyvek that they used to wrap houses. It's very common to use that as a ground sheet, and you put the Tyvek down, you put your sleeping pad on top of it, and your sleeping bag on top of that. But anyway, he then shines a light on it, and the thing turns green. And I'm not a scientist. I didn't know scorpions actually did that. I went to pick it up because I thought it was a toy. I thought he was messing with me. And my fingers got within like 2 inches of the scorpion, and the whole thing just flexed up, and I jumped right back. I was terrified, but that's one lesson I will never forget. They apparently glow orange or glow green under a UV light. Oh man, you can't see it at all. But hey, just to prove to you that I saw a bear, here's a very blurry, terrible picture of a bear that's up a tree. I saw maybe 6 of them over the course of the trail. This is my favorite picture of us camping together. It's just at this very dystopian, little hut. You understand. It's another burnout area in Southern Oregon. Huckleberries and dirty hands. This is hikers love benches. This is the Zama Village which is part of the Crater Lake National Park. Running some errands. We had to hitch a ride up to the post office to do some errands up there. One thing people kind of wonder about is how do you get food? And a part of it is you'll go and you'll hike till you get to the next road crossing, usually anywhere from 5 to 7 days. You'll stick your thumb out and you'll hitchhike down into the town, and you'll get your food. You'll spend a day there if you want to take a break, but then you hitchhike back up. So we do a fair amount of hitchhiking, but because it's so close to the trail, people seem to be more or less okay with it. I don't believe it's against the law in that particular corridor, but there could be, I don't totally know there. This is a cool story. So it's a terrible picture, but a good story. I'm on the left looking pretty haggard, and the guy with the badge on the right, he had come up out of the dark and walked in, and I was like, is that Ryan Simcoe? As it turns out, this is the guy who worked at the outdoor store in Chicago, a few blocks from my apartment, who sold me everything I needed for the Appalachian Trail. I happened to run into him while I'm on the Pacific Crest Trail, 1,500 miles away in Crater Lake National Park. Crater Lake. Hey, trail crews. It's always great to see trail crews, people working on the trails, keeping outdoor recreation accessible for us. I've talked a lot about how I don't like road walks, but when you're with your friends, road walks can be so enjoyable because you get to walk shoulder to shoulder. You got to watch for traffic, that safety kind of stuff, but it is very nice to be able to like walk and chat with your friends at a much slower pace at a grade that's acceptable for vehicles. Otherwise, you're trying to like shout at your friend who's like 2.5 feet in front of you, and hopefully they can hear it, but it's a tough way to have a conversation. Laundry pick. We're in Bend, Oregon, which I guess has the highest number of breweries per capita of any other place in the country. That's my rain gear because I had to do laundry. Lib's friend was living in Oregon and had visited us in Bend. And she is a social worker, and I thought I had made a very clever joke. Her and I were walking to the post office or the laundromat or something, and I was looking like this, and I said, "There's people looking at us," and I said, "They probably are correct in recognizing that you're a social worker. However, they're probably mistaken because they probably think you're my social worker." And we, like I said, is the highest number of breweries per capita of any place in the country, and we came to one, and of course they had free beer for us. And this is the Three Sisters area, very volcanic. This is the area where we did the double marathon, 54 miles. It started raining at the end of the day, and one of our friends, he was so exhausted that he messed up setting his tent up, and he had to walk. He soaked everything he owned and had to walk and go and sleep in a bathroom. I look at this picture when I'm sad. This is me. Unfortunately, the whole gang's not in it, but it's at the 2,000 mile mark. Me and Jeej, Golden Girl, are trying to look sexy for the camera. Unfortunately, Lib could not keep it together. And this is where the weather changed. About a week before this, someone pulls out their phone, checks the weather, and it says, "Oh, look, 10% chance of rain next week." That's, we all chuckled, but then we kind of had this ominous moment of ooh, it could actually change. And sure enough, it did. This is towards the northern area of Oregon, the northern end of Oregon. And that terrible little tent that I showed you earlier, I spent 22 hours because it was just misting all day long, and it was windy, and it was in the upper 30s, lower 40s. Everything was cold and uncomfortable and soaking wet. So I spent 22 hours in my tent. I heard my friends walk by me. They kept going. I was done for the day and then some change. I find them the next day at the base of Mount Jefferson, and they had no idea that there was a mountain right behind them until the clouds cleared very suddenly. So, who knows? I could have had a great view of it from my tent right here, but I will never know. This was kind of a special moment. I apologize for it's portrait, not landscape, but I came over a pass, and when you come over a pass, you never know what you're going to see. And I happened to get my first view of Mount Hood. This is the view from Mount Hood, looking back at Mount Jefferson. I believe Three Sisters off there, further off in the distance. This is the Timberline Lodge. This is the best meal on the trail. If you drive to the top, however, as you can see, there's lots of cars here. I don't know if it's any good, but I can guarantee you, if you walk from Mexico, it'll be a very tasty meal. It's also where they filmed all the outdoor scenes for the Jack Nicholson movie with Stephen King. This is, The Shining. Thank you. That hat was a mistake, but this is us crossing the Cascade, not the Cascade. This is us crossing the Bridge of the Gods into Washington. Washington, of course, is the evergreen state. And it's because it looks like this for the most part. Moss hanging off of every single little branch it is incredible. It's also one of the hardest sections of trail, the hardest section of the trail. It's like 500, 600 miles, and it's just steep up, steep down. You'll walk 4,000 feet uphill, then you walk 4,000 feet downhill, and you'll do it all over again. But it's beautiful. It is by far the most beautiful section of trail. It's also, this is probably this is early September, mid-September. Days are getting shorter. A lot more wind and rain. Of course, not this night. We were very lucky. This is the Goat Rocks Wilderness. You know, this is one of the most highly anticipated parts of the trail because it's so incredibly gorgeous. Apparently, you get on this ridge and you have the view of Mount Rainier like right in front of your face. You look back and you have a view of Mount Hood right in front of your face, and you can see all the other volcanoes, you know, down the way. And of course, when we got there, we had an absolute whiteout. We couldn't see a darn thing. Cleared up though. We were pretty wet and uncomfortable after that, so we went into town and we got this little cabin at like, you know, it was like a ski area during the off season. We just stayed in this little cabin for a couple of days and dried up. And I don't know what it is about this like little cabin, but a lot of good memories from there. I think we just watched like Planet Earth and ate frozen pizzas for 2 days. There's the first view of Mount Rainier that we had. You can see my friends right here. There's a few of these cabins that are just open to hikers, and we went and stayed here one night. I think I accidentally set my sock on fire, unfortunately, because there's this cast iron stove back here, and I put on the cast iron stove to dry it out, and then it caught on fire. So that was a little bit unfortunate. This tree, I think, is the most perfect tree I've ever seen in my entire life. Mount Rainier. I would like to climb that someday, but I got to get some glacier training and glacier experience. We when we did Shasta, we had about 3 to 5. No, we had like 4 or 5,000 feet of snow, steep snow, and we had crampons and ice axe, and we had bergstrom across, but we did not have any glaciers. This is probably the only time I got like a little bit of a lump in my throat in the entire trail. Coming into I think it's Stevens Pass or Snoqualmie Pass. And I see that road, and maybe you're sitting here watching and guess what road that is. It's Interstate 90. So everything I've ever known was, 20 miles from that road. So I could have gone down to the pass, hitched east, and been eating deep dish in a couple of days. This is a particular tough section of Washington because you're just stuck in these canyons for like way longer than you expect, days, and you'll walk up and up and up and up, and you just won't get out of them. Hey, and this is my study abroad romance from like 5 years before this, from 2011, is going to come to the United States and says she wants to hike with me. And I knew it was a bad idea then, but I still said sure. And so she lasted about 3 days, or I don't even remember, it might have been a little longer than that, but she did not enjoy it. And so we had to get her off trail pretty quickly, but I'm glad she got to have that experience. This is the first week of October in the Cascades. I borrowed a different tent for when my friend joined me. This is us getting her off trail a few days later. we had to, there we are. We stopped these people and said, hey, we got a problem. Because there was not an easy way to get her off trail. We came across this 24-mile driveway, and luckily these people were there mushroom hunting and were nice enough to give us a ride. This guy, his mom, for whatever reason, her and I stayed in touch for like the next couple of years after I hiked the trail. So that was a cool experience. You know, again, the community people are more than happy to help hikers. This is a massive leaf. So after I got my friend off trail, to do that, I had left all of my friends, was alone. I ended up getting very, very, very sick. And, you know, like one of the things they say is that it's not a through hike if you don't crap your pants. And I did just that this evening. And luckily there were these wet dinner plate sized maple leaves I had to clean me up. I won't go into details, but it was an absolutely disgusting experience, violent even. And there's me. I have less than 100 miles to go to the end. Unfortunately, I still cannot trust a fart. This is the trail. More and more moisture is coming down. There's this kind of like feeling of the season-ending snowstorm coming. And so I said earlier, I skipped a 30-mile section in Washington, and it's up in this area. And the reason I did it was because I'm talking to this ranger, and she's like, hey, I've got some books on avalanche safety if you'd like. And I was like, you know what? No, thanks. I'm just going to skip this 30-mile section where it's going to go into the elevations where those are a risk and get to Canada. So avalanches and diarrhea is why I skipped that section. But this is the night. This is after I got sick, and I'm feeling very vulnerable, very alone. I ended up sleeping in this cave. There's a couple hikers in like the next cave over. They're not really caves. They're just these like boulders that have fallen down. You can like boulders the size of like massive dump trucks, the kind that they use at landfills, etc. And I breathed in all this dust all night, and I felt even worse the next morning. South Fork of the Agnes, the hardest river to cross. And we get snow. This is the last couple of days of the trail. I'm literally racing against a season-ending storm at this point. Those are the North Cascades. North Cascades National Park, one of the most beautiful areas I've ever been. I really hope to get to go back someday. Believe it or not, even though this looks relatively level, those little snowy, icy buildup of snow and ice on the trail made it very slippery and made it a little bit scary to fall down, but it didn't happen. Oh, also tamaracks all through this area, different than the ones we have out east, of course, here, but I had never really noticed them here in the Midwest. Of course, we have them all over the place, but I'd never really noticed them until I see them all turning yellow in this particular part of Washington. Water sources starting to freeze over. Just, there's ice everywhere. It's cold. I'm uncomfortable. Still sick. But the sun's shining. The sun was just an illusion at this point, though. It doesn't actually make you warmer. This is, I think, my last evening on trail. Yeah, this is a spoiler alert. This is that little gap they have in the trees is actually the U.S.-Canadian border, and you see it right before you get to the end. But October 12th, I think I started May 1st and ended October 12th, and it was a great adventure. Oh, and you'll notice I'm wearing shoes at the end. When I got sick, I ended up blowing out a sandal. Both my sandals. I had a sandal strap and both shoes break within like a day and a half of each other. I tried to fix them with duct tape for a little while, but it did not work. And when I was talking to the ranger who told me about all the avalanches in this particular stretch of trail, I was able to fish a pair of old hiker shoes out of her garbage can and use those for just the last couple of days. So yeah, I went a little late, but I appreciate those who stuck around. I apologize for getting a little late, but I'll be around for questions. And there's one thing I do want to share. There's nowadays when I'm not hiking, I of course follow hikers on social media. The hiker I am most looking forward to following is a guy by the name of Kevin Newsome. And his last name is Newsome. He's a very amateur. He's very good at YouTube. He's very funny, and I think he's probably in his mid to late 60s. So I know some people in the audience might also be in that age group, but he's a very talented social media guy. So that was my trail. Thank you.
All right. What we can do now is if anyone has any questions, I wrote a couple down. I wanted to know what were your most dangerous encounter?
My most dangerous encounter. I don't know if I've ever actually felt unsafe on the trail. I mean, I would say the weather after I drop my friend off where I'm all alone and you know, I'm very sick, my shoes are falling apart, was probably where I felt the most vulnerable. I woke up to that in that little cave I was sleeping. I woke up to a mouse dropping like right in front of my face, and I was convinced for like a day that I might have hantavirus, but it turns out it was just a stomach bug. And hantavirus is like a hiker. It's a disease that mice carry that has killed at least one hiker in the Appalachian Trail. It's carried in mouse saliva and feces, and basically just shuts your lungs down. And if you get the ICU within like 48 hours, that's where, you know, that's the best you can do. But that didn't happen to me.
Did you keep your folks? How often were you able to let people back home know that things were going well?
So probably every 5 to 7 days. There's one stretch where I had to go, I think, 8 days in between towns. But there's also a big part of the trail community as they'll have different sections. There's this huge spreadsheet online that anyone can edit, and it actually tells people can get in and say, okay, I was at this, you know, these coordinates, and I have Verizon, and I had, you know, so many bars of service. And so if you've got the battery power, you know, you can get phone service in a lot of these places, even in the backcountry.
Huh.
So how did you charge your phone for the 5 months? Do you have like a solar powered charger or?
Nothing fancy like that. I don't, solar powered, they work okay. A lot of what we would do is I think a lot of people probably have these nowadays where you get an extra charge on your phone and then just plug it into your other phone or into your phone and you just charge it that way. But, you know, one of the kind of colloquialisms we say on the trail is chasing the plug. You'll run out of charge and you got to get to town so you can charge for a little bit. And so, you know, just how it goes. We like to pretend we're mountain men, but really we're just mountain men of the 21st century. There's a big difference.
So what's the difference between hiking from north to south versus hiking from south to north, and why would you choose that way?
Yeah, that's a great question. I realized about halfway through I didn't really explain all of that. So the weather window is a big part of it. I might remember me mentioning things like season-ending storm and that kind of stuff. So the High Sierra, like the central part, you can't really enter that until mid to late June because there's just so much snowpack. You have to wait for that to melt off. So if you start too early, you're going to run into big snow. If you start too late, you're going to hit a season-ending storm in Washington. So when you're hiking south to north, you have a much longer weather window. I would say probably 75% of hikers prefer to hike south to north because you have a longer weather window. You can start as early as April 1st and probably as late as end of May if you're a fast hiker. And then hiking, you know, north to south, hiking from Canada to Mexico, you have to wait until the snow in the Cascades is melted, but you have to get through the Sierras before the season-ending storms come there. So once you're through the Sierras, though, you're home free. And I think you probably have about a month less time to hike southbound than northbound.
Beth is asking, she's complimenting you on your pictures and how beautiful they are. And did you take them all with just your phone?
Yeah, they're all, I mean, that's the nice thing about those landscapes is, even a phone camera can do a decent job.
Mhm.
And an amateur photographer.
They're amazing. They're amazing.
So everybody has the capability to unmute themselves and ask any questions if they want at this point.
Just want to say that was really a wonderful presentation.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I looked over when I was in the desert, when I was talking through the desert, and realized it was already 7:30. So I kind of got a little freaked out, but of course there's a lot more stuff we need to talk about at the beginning than, the end.
I'm sitting next to a husband type guy who's climbed a bunch of the mountains in the Sierras, Whitney and Russell. And what's that other big one? Williamson, right.
White Mountain.
And then White Mountain.
Nice.
Oh, White Mountain and just right outside of Bishop, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
That I'd really like to do White Mountain.
it's pretty cool.
Bristlecone Pine Forest is there too.
Yeah, I actually went to the Bristlecones right after the trail, and it was a unreal experience.
Yeah, they are pretty cool.
Wow. What's it saying?
Unfortunately, with Zoom, Greer, you don't get feedback while you're doing your program. With your sense of humor is hitting Sue and myself right where we live, and I'm sure I know some of the folks out there will appreciate it too.
What's that?
I did get a text from your mom, just so you know.
What was that, Don?
I got a text from your mom.
Well, what did you say before that?
Well, your much a sense of humor, just
Sure, yeah.
your delivery. We appreciate it greatly.
Good.
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear that.
It's hard on Zoom because, I was laughing and then I thought, and I'm sure everyone else was laughing, but everyone's
Chat.
so you can't hear that. So
Yeah,
Chat.
I didn't see a lot of swing in the numbers. I could see how many participants there were there, so that was the only feedback I could get, though.
We got a lot of giggles out of it
Good, I'm glad.
and beautiful photos.
Did you see any older folks up there hiking it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. There's with the Appalachian Trail, it's there's kind of, and it happens as well with the Pacific Crest Trail. Just the Pacific Crest Trail, the culture, I think it varies a little bit more of hikers, but on the Appalachian Trail for certainly there's the group who just finished college and the group who just retired, and those are your two groups.
Oh, you got to raise your hand if you want to speak. But I can type.
no, feel free to jump in. You don't have to raise your hand. If you're on unmute, you can go ahead and ask away.
Did you see any owls up there?
I saw one owl. I saw a barn owl, and it's the only one I've ever seen. That was in Marengo, California, on a fire alternate.
Yeah, that would be cool.
It was like in town too. It was a small little desert town where there's not a lot going on, and it just happened to look up at the right time and just right on a telephone pole, and he flew across the street, and it's like, oh, that's kind of a cool experience.
For sure.
So how often did you actually get fully clean?
So yeah, I think I mentioned that my buddy G just thinks I'm like the dirtiest hiker, and there's nothing he can do about it. The longest I went without a shower was probably 2 weeks. If you're really dedicated, you could probably get a shower a week or a shower every 5 days.
Yeah.
And when you have those swimming holes though too, that really helps. But the other thing though about showering though is being dirty is not nearly as bad as the process of getting dirty, because then you kind of have to reacclimate to just this kind of uncomfortable grossness.
Yeah, definitely would have to get used to the can't shower every day thing.
Yeah.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, Greer, thank you for your time, your experience, and appreciate it greatly. I hope before you cut out, you get a chance to look through the chat. There's wonderful comments about your presentation, and it's always good to hear and good to see you.
All right. Yeah, I will definitely scroll through that. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gary, anything to close out?
No, just to remind everybody that, I mean, the recording will be available probably within the next day or so. I'm gonna shut it off right now, but